I'm basically just going to cover the who, what, where, when, and why of this podcast. I don't believe I need to cover how. So let's just jump right into it. Obviously, this is my first episode, so I really don't have all the technology set up. So I'm going to learn as I go. So these will definitely improve as the episodes go on. So please bear with me. The reason I'm doing this podcast, let me back up. Let's jump into who. So I am a recent civil engineering graduate from the University of Akron in Akron, Ohio. Real quick, if you know LeBron James, you probably know us from Akron, Ohio. It's the same place. So that tells you exactly where I'm located. I graduated with a BS in civil engineering as summa cum laude in the spring of 2016, and I have a unique opportunity to look into 3D printing for a master's degree, thesis / small business project. And so with this, I'm doing a lot of researching regarding 3D printing. Now, 3D printing was not taught at all in school. So everything I've ever learned has been through Googling and going down the rabbit's hole of clicking a link and then clicking another link and then clicking another link, or spending hours watching YouTube videos. And what I'm going to do with this podcast is, the selfish part is I get to grow myself as, someone who can be respected in the industry. And then for you guys, you get to learn about 3D printing. The technology is really new, and I will be sure to touch on the history of 3D printing, where it's come from, where it's going, etc. in future podcasts. But that's really why I'm doing it. The why is because I have to do all this research to really understand the technology for my project, for this small business idea, that I figured, you know what? I'm sure a lot of people, this could help a lot of people. Because when I first came out with this idea, and unfortunately, I can't go too in depth into what the idea is. Obviously, I need to protect some of my own things. My email will be, all over the place. Like, social media links will also be in the show notes. So if you want to contact me and work with me or talk to me about it, I'm more than happy to do something like that. But as far as just sharing it openly like this, not fully comfortable, to be completely honest with you. And so, back to the story, I have to do all this research. So I figured, you know what? The selfish part is, it helps me to learn it better, to have to describe to someone, to talk to someone, and then answer questions or comments that people leave regarding, whatever the technology is, or that I talked about, or the project that I talked about. And then the benefit for you guys is you get to learn new technology. It's very new. It's only going to get bigger. So if you can, learn now and become an expert in it and know more than everyone else, you'll be respected, 5, 10, 20 years down the road when it becomes a big thing. Kind of like Elon Musk is very well respected with electric cars and, self-driving cars in that sense. So when those become huge, in 5, 10 years, he is going to be like the go-to expert for it. So it's that same kind of idea, if you will. So that's really the who I am and the what I'm doing. Also, my current employment, I'm actually going to probably end up bouncing around a little bit during this podcast between the questions of who, what, where, when. But I work currently for an engineering company in Akron. I'm a bridge engineer, so I work there part-time and go to grad school full-time. And this is my passion project, is learning about 3D printing. And I will be sure to touch on that in later podcasts. So Structural MD is a small business I own. And the reason I'm calling this podcast Structural MD is because originally I made one podcast episode, probably 2 to 3 months ago, maybe even more. I launched an episode on SoundCloud. I don't even think it was longer than 5 minutes. And I called it the Additive Manufacturing Maniacs Podcast. And the thing with Structural MD is, I think I'm going to do 2 episodes a week. Starting out, I'll probably just do one around additive manufacturing. And eventually, I'll hope to bring on guests and, interview them to get their expertise and their opinions and things that they've learned. And then also, I think another episode I'll release is civil engineering project. Someone that's pushed the boundaries of civil engineering. So, for example, the Burj Khalifa is a pretty well-respected, well-known building in the world. It's ridiculously tall. It's built on sand. It's an impressive feat of engineering. And so I didn't want to pigeonhole myself by calling this the Additive Manufacturing Maniac Podcast, because then, in the future, when I start doing episodes strictly on civil engineering projects, and basically, again, explaining the who, what, where, when, of the project, I'm really kind of pigeonholed because the title does not lend itself to that. So I might think of a more creative title as, the podcast goes, and maybe people have suggestions and things of that nature. But for right now, I'm just going to stick with the Structural MD podcast. It's going to be hosted through my website anyway, so it works out that way. But like I said, this is also going to be pretty raw. My editing skills are very lax, so I'm not going to cut out too many mistakes on my end because, hey, we're all human and we trip over our own 2 feet sometimes. I'm going to start with doing 1 episode a week, just strictly on 3D printing, and I'll probably release those Monday morning at 12 o'clock, midnight, Sunday night, or Monday morning, however you want to look at that. And then as the podcast grows and I find a rhythm with how all this works, I'll probably do another episode that's released on Fridays that is strictly a civil engineering project. And then the next step would be to be able to bring on guests, either in 3D printing or in civil engineering, and interview them strictly about either the technology, new technologies, or cool projects that they've worked on. And that would be released probably on Wednesdays, kind of space things out. But that's way down the road. First things first, it's just to grow this podcast, really understand how this works because I've never done it before, and then add in new facets and features. So you know who I am, you know why I'm doing this podcast, you know what it's going to be about, and that's really all there is to cover in the first podcast episode. I'm sure there's things I've missed out. Don't worry, this is only episode 1 of God knows how many. I hope it goes on for a long time and becomes... My goal, obviously, is to become the number 1 respected podcast in engineering, for that matter. But I'm sure I've missed some things. 1, because I didn't have notes. And 2, just because I couldn't think of everything. So I'll be sure to touch on them in later episodes. And be sure to stay tuned for the first episode, the first quote-unquote official, knowledgeable episode of 3D printing coming out next Monday. Until next time, thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, you can write us a review, you can message me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. All those links will be in the show notes, and I look forward to meeting you guys someday and hearing from you.